This is just kind of a brief overview. I think anybody that's been in real estate for a while understands kind of what a 4-point inspection is. I just kind of put this together just to kind of give some additional tips on it, maybe some things that folks don't know about it. It's not going to take very long, and then we'll get on to the next topic. So, if you have any questions, just wait to the end and we can obviously answer them then. And I'll just go through this. And like I said, if you guys have anything you want to ask or input, just we'll talk about it once this is over. So what is a 4-point inspection? It's an overview of the 4 insurable areas of the dwelling, that being the roof, electrical system, the plumbing, and the air conditioning. Basically, what you don't want to use a 4-point inspection for is seller's disclosures. Don't rely on that as a in place of a seller's disclosure. Should not really be used as a standalone for purchases of a house, other than for the purpose of just getting insurance and maybe just getting a quick and dirty overview of like the age and condition of the roof, and the age of like the water heater and the AC. And again, just like I said, there anything other than the procurement of property insurance, that should really be the main focus of what this is for. The brief history of this inspection is we're really the only state in the entire 50 states that uses any sort of 4-point insurance inspection. Most other states don't have anything like it whatsoever. Pre-2012, they were limited at best. It was, you could use any form you wanted. There was no, anything about it. You could do whatever you want. It was kind of hokey at best. Questionable practices as to who could complete the forms. Like they didn't even actually have like that it had to be signed by a contractor or anybody. It could just kind of be anybody could fill it out, really. And there wasn't any photo requirements, so you could just send in the form and you didn't have to have pictures of anything. So the point of it was kind of odd. That has obviously transformed. We kind of went through an insurance renaissance where there was lots of companies writing insurance and it was plentiful and the market was healthy. And now we're back to kind of what it was after the hurricanes, where the market is terrible right now. But in 2012, Citizens created their own state form for their own use, because they are a state-run company. Most other companies kind of de facto accept that form or kind of use it as the official form. No other company kind of has their own form, so everybody kind of just really uses the Citizens form, and it just kind of became the industry standard. Obviously, like I said, market changes. We had a healthy real estate market. There was more companies writing insurance. There's in 2014, they started licensing home inspectors in the state of Florida. So we have a ton of inspectors now, and still, every month more coming on board. And there really isn't any sort of coursework taught about them. The issues with the current 4-point inspection form as it relates to let me get my camera different position here. As it relates to the issues with the current form is that it's really a lack of clarity and specifics on it. It has vague and ambiguous terms on it. Especially sort of at the end of the Citizens form, there's like a section that just says additional observations. There's a checkbox on the form for cloth covered wiring, but they don't really definitively define what that term is or should be. And there's really no guidelines for the specific information like a specific company is looking for. So it's still not the best it could be. And I find it kind of odd that really since 2012, they haven't revised that form. So, it is what it is, but we just kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. We're doing just a quick case study here on, cloth covered wiring. Let me go actually, let's see, how do I go back here? Here we go. Slideshow. So cloth covered wiring, just a case study. If you're an inspector and you don't know what that is, Kind of true cloth covered wiring was essentially the iteration of wiring after knob and tube. So kind of in the late 40s, they switched out from using knob and tube wiring, which was kind of the predominant wiring that we had, kind of in the 20s and 30s. And they basically took the exact same wire that they used for knob and tube. It was a thin wire that had rubber insulation wrapped around it, and then they kind of wrapped it in a cloth cover. And they put that into a jacketed sheathing. And that was all well and good, except the problem is it had rubber around it. And as everybody knows, in Florida, rubber doesn't last too long down here because of the heat and the humidity kind of deteriorate. So true cloth covered wiring was really used in the 40s. And at that point in the early 50s, like 1953, 54, they kind of stopped. And we had some technology advancements, and they started using what is called thermoplastic sheathed wiring. And that's the same wiring that you have today. Like if you were to go to Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart, it kind of has that plastic coating around the actual copper on the wire. And they jacketed that in sort of a rayon. Some of you guys have been in older houses. You may see it. It kind of has like a silver coating on it. That actually is not cloth covered wiring, but it does sort of have a cloth cover on it. Well, if you're not an experienced inspector and you don't know what the true definition of cloth covered wiring is, you're susceptible to marking that on the form. And the problem with that is a lot of companies will not write true cloth covered wiring because it is a electrical fire hazard. Problem with it is that rubber coating on that old wire that was used in the 1940s is susceptible to drying, and it's susceptible to cracking. It's susceptible to even just falling off the wire. And so what can happen is those wires behind your wall, the hot and the neutrals, as that rubber deteriorates, you can actually just have exposed bare wiring. They can come in contact with each other and spark, and they kind of cause house fires. It's happened in the past. And thus why the stigma on cloth wiring is that the insurance companies don't want to write it, because it's essentially a wiring that now in 2020s, in this decade, is way past its useful lifespan and should be replaced. But the wiring that was used in the 1950s, 1960s, that was thermoplastic sheathed and wrapped in that sort of rayon jacket is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's still perfectly fine. That thermoplastic sheathing on the wire is typically still in good shape, and it's not cloth covered wiring. But if you have an inspector, one of the hundreds, well, thousands of newly minted licensed inspectors out there filling this form out, that they don't teach this stuff in inspector school. So you're not going to know what that is. And if it's marked, it's going to cause problems. It could cause problems with trying to get insurance. If it's marked cloth and that company doesn't write that, and technically it's not cloth. So that's kind of a case study of the shortcomings of the form, is that it doesn't specifically say, what that is, or it doesn't clearly define it. And again, that's just a shortcoming on the form. Miscellaneous hazards, because there is that section at the very end of the 2-page form, other remarks, other hazards. I've seen them out there. The citizens director, at one time, there was stuff on YouTube about the case hearings when they made the form and everything, and they basically said anything that's on a standard home inspection should be put on a 4-point inspection. Well, that's ludicrous and insane, but I've seen 4-point forms from inspectors out there where the door between the garage and the house is maybe an older door, maybe just a screen door, or maybe a storm door with just glass in it. Nowadays they have to be fire rated in case a fire breaks out in the garage. Well, people are putting that on the form. And like, what are you going to do? You're going to hold up a real estate transaction, the seller has to replace the door between the garage that's 70 years old, or things like that. Lack of GFCI protection. I've seen that on the form. The standards for those are always changing. I mean, nowadays it's got to be the laundry, the disposal, the dishwasher, the kitchen, the bath, the outside, the garage. It's just insane. And I've seen that being put on a 4-point insurance form. Well, it's not a hazard. It's not an electrocution hazard. Nobody's going to die, immediately because there isn't a GFCI in the garage. We've had electricity with no GFIs for 50 years, and we were okay. Granted, they're great. They do offer protection, but from an insurance standpoint, 49 out of their 50 states don't do this nonsense. So lack of GFCI or arc fault protection breakers doesn't really belong on that form. They don't specifically ask it, but yet I see it being put on there and being required to have updates to get insurance. Low insulation in the attic. What's that have to do with getting insurance? Nothing. The insurance company isn't going to cover your house because you don't have enough insulation. Like, it's ridiculous. Duct work that may be damaged by rodents. Again, the insurance company isn't going to cover your duct work in the attic. If something happens to it, it's not an insurable hazard unless it's like a fire or something, flood or anything like that. So again, those type of things don't belong on the forms. They get put on there all the time. Again, lack of training, lack of knowledge, ambiguity. So what do you do? Common issues that should be commonly expected to be found on 4-point inspections. If you're the listing agent or you're the buying agent, these are typical problems that you would find in a lot of our older housing stock around here. Wiring that is inside of a living area. So that would be even the garage or laundry rooms, utility rooms, spare rooms, anything that's exposed, coming down the drywall or coming down the wall area. Like if you take your hand and you can physically grab it, shouldn't be able to do that. That should all be sort of behind wallboard or in some sort of conduit. Same thing with the exterior splices up in an attic. We see that quite a bit. People take shortcuts and just put the wire nuts on the wires where they splice them in and they don't put them in a protective sealed box. We run into that a lot in older homes. Kind of the exception would just be, like I said, anything that you can grasp or touch. Typically the older air ceilings where the garages don't have drywall on the ceilings or anything, they have the wiring run along the joists in there. That's still okay. Today that shouldn't all have to be covered or anything like that. So that would kind of be an exception. Like I said, a lot of it tends to be electrical, and sort of roof in nature. That's a kind of a common thing with plumbing. Leaks at supply valves or drains. Shouldn't have any plumbing leaks at all. The inspection companies want to see pictures. They ask for it on the form of the valves. So having a toilet shut off valve, having proper valves under the sinks to shut off water in case there's a pipe burst or a leak. The insurance companies obviously want to not have a lot of water damage claims, so they want to see pictures of those valves. So if the handle's missing or it's damaged, it's probably going to be something that's going to need to be fixed. Kind of a more recent thing is water heaters inside of catch pans. I've seen the companies now wanting to see those catch pans on water heaters when they're inside of a living space. That was kind of a new code thing in 2002 that they added. So, if you have a pre-O2 water heater, that may not be present. That could cause some problems. We do get, requests from the insurance companies that they want to see the catch pans. And we've even had, I know State Farm, which doesn't write a lot of insurance, so probably most of you guys haven't encountered it. They actually want to see a drain on the catch pan to the outside of the house. But that's, I can probably count on one hand the number of State Farm requests that we've had in the past few years. So that's not really a big thing or anything really that I'd hang your hat on. Roofs have become more difficult and it keeps evolving, especially even with Citizens. They're not writing roofs under 5 years of useful life. They're not writing shingle roofs over 20 years. They're not writing flat roofs over 15 years, and they're not obviously going to write anything with damaged roof materials or leaks. So take that for what it is. If you've got older roofs, you've got to plan on that potentially being an issue. So HVAC, heating not functional, or properties where there is no heat can be a problem. They don't want folks that are occupying the house bringing in space heaters. So if you've got, we see rental houses quite a bit that just have boxed window air conditioners. those do come equipped or not equipped with heat strips. So you want to make sure that the house has some sort of non-portable heating source, whatever that may be. 95% of what we see obviously has central heat, so typically not a problem. Again, judgment calls, GFI protection, swimming pool safety issues. Obviously, like if you have a whirlpool jetted tub, those should be on a GFCI because you've got a pump, pumping electric pump, pumping water. Those have always been required to be on GFCI, even as old as like the 70s. So those could be 4-point issues if you've got one where there is no, I kind of know I went over the GFCI thing, but anywhere like a above ground swimming pool where you have a pool pump, those are supposed to be plugged into a GFCI outlet. So there could be, judgment calls as it, relates to the pool safety. Putting a bonding / grounding wire on the pool pump again. So if somehow that metal pool pump becomes electrically charged due to a short circuit or something, that it carries that current away from the water and back to the ground. So those things probably belong on a 4-point because they are a liability issue. If you're swimming in the pool and the pool pump is on and it has some sort of short circuit and there's no grounding wire to it to protect it, or a GFCI to shut the circuit down, whoever's in the pool could get shocked, and that's obviously a liability hazard. And the insurance company's looking to mitigate those type of issues. I guess common solutions, if you run into issues where you get these wild 4 points back, especially if you're like a listing agent, you don't know who's doing the inspection, you don't know the credentials of the inspector, how long they've been in business, yada yada yada. So you don't know what the heck you're going to get on the back end coming back to you. Is possibly if you get something where it's just like you look at and you're like, why is this on 4-point? This doesn't make sense. You could maybe try calling them and reaching out and just talking about it. If it doesn't make sense, you can get a second opinion. Whether or not that changes anything from the buyer's perspective. I've been in cases where the listing agent had a house and the buyer chose their own inspector. They come in and they put all these crazy things on the 4-point form, and both the buyer's agent and the seller's agent are like frustrated over the situation because they've tried talking to the, they put maybe the door between the house and the garage isn't fire rated. I've seen that, and the inspector won't change it. They're sticking to their guns. They're adamant. This has to be on the form, blah, blah. Well, not really. It's not really a insurance related problem. So they've gone out and gotten another inspector that they know has been experienced and has been doing this for a long time to come in and just do another 4-point on the house and fill it out the way that it should be intended to be filled out. That obviously costs a little bit extra money, but it's one way to kind of save the deal if both agents or parties are kind of on the side that this is a little bit ridiculous. I mean, even sometimes the clients are like, why is this happening? And it's kind of, I'm saying no fault of their own. It's just kind of is what it is because of the ambiguity of the form and the lack of training and things like that. And again, keep clients in the loop as to the situation. Again, just because an inspector says something, it doesn't always mean that it's stamped in gold, embossed, this is the letter of the law type of thing. You can always ask around. I do get calls from time to time of agents, selling agents saying, just what I said. They get this 4-point form back and it's just, a little crazy. So that's just one thing to keep in your back pocket. It is an option. Like I said, you can go outside of the usual inspector, but make sure everybody's in the know on that. Make sure the buyer is like, yeah, we understand this is kind of a little bit crazy. We can't get anywhere with our current inspector. If we have to pay a little extra to get the deal done, so be it. Not the opportune or best way to have to go about doing things, I understand, but kind of is what it is. Listing agents on older properties, consider having roofing or electrical areas inspected prior to placing on the market. That way, you can maybe avoid some major hassles. That way you're not, the one thing most homeowners that own a home aren't doing, they're not getting on their roof every year. If a homeowner's toilet is leaking, it's probably not going to be something that's going to be occurring very long because they live there and they know it's going to be happening. So like a lot of those type of surprises don't always sneak up on you, because the homeowners are fixing those areas. Well, the homeowner isn't typically climbing on the roof every year to make sure that the tropical storm we had in July didn't, blow a shingle off of the roof or something. So something to think about, to avoid having to scramble kind of last minute to make those repairs. Um, Listing agents, you should make your clients aware, especially of long-time owners. You have people out there that have, well, it's more rare now than it was years ago when I made this presentation. So maybe this isn't quite as normal, but a couple of years ago when the insurance market was healthy, you had people that were with their insurance company for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and the 4 points hadn't evolved yet to what they are now. So people had their insurance, and this whole dance that we have to do with the 4-point inspection was kind of new to them. So, and it was, I have insurance now in my house. I've had it for 10 years. What do you mean I gotta fix that exposed wire in the garage? I don't understand, and it was a pushback thing. They couldn't rationalize why they had to do it because, quote unquote, they had insurance. It still may be around, but like I said, I think kind of the more savvy buyers that have bought within maybe the last decade are kind of accustomed to it. But again, you may still have those homeowners that have been around for a while. So this may be a thing that they're not familiar with. So when you go for like a listing presentation or you're discussing with them about the process, you got to make them aware that, hey, the insurance market right now is a little bit crazy. You want to know what you're dealing with as far as the roof and electrical things, and just prepare them like, hey, you may need to make some concessions, especially since we're now removed from the no inspection contingency. We're going to give you our firstborn child and offer 50 grand over the listing price market that we had the last 2 years. That's now gone away. So we're now, having to make repairs on things to get insurance and to do those sorts of things. So that was that presentation.